It's Friday afternoon, it's 4 p.m. in Central Europe, and it's 3 p.m. in Scotland, and it's Space Café Scotland time. Our Space Café Scotland by the wonderful Angela Mathis will begin very soon. As always, we appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback, and we will learn and we will improve based on that. So, SpaceWatch.Global, for the few of you that does not know us, is a Europe-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. And first, I would like to thank all our private and corporate supporters that are committed to keep our independent journalism alive. We really appreciate that. In case you want to join our supporter program, be aware that it's just a click away on our website. And I know many of you are familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcast. So don't miss the latest one with Michael Lenz and Mark Subaro, NASA creative wizards, about space storytelling and the art of communicating science. Absolute awesome conversation, I can tell you. And stay tuned for more Space Café radios and Space Economy Insight episodes. We are working on a few of them at the moment, and they will be released very, very soon, potentially over the weekend. So you find this and all our audio services wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you want to become a space watcher and let the world know about it with your cool t-shirt or your mugs, you find a fan shop on our website, and also just a click away. If you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive on our webpage in the event section, and of course, later then on YouTube. Please note that we will host our Space Café Scotland live regularly. And with that, my job is partially done. I know I have to do a job later on as well. So I would like to hand over to your host today, not in Edinburgh, but in London. Angela, over to you.
Thank you, Torsten, and welcome everyone to Space Café Scotland. And we've decided this is where we're exploring where energy and finance meet space. I've got to make an immediate statement of thanks to Sharon Pride from Scottish Enterprise and the SDI team, who came up with this, because Scotland is not just, we've been doing a lot, and if you've been following our progress in space, we're doing quite a lot in hardware and spaceports, but there's a big drive to understand how you can use space observation data and how that can be used almost as an enabler to boost other markets and other parts of our economy. And of course, energy and finance are really important. So I've got three great guests on with me today. From AstroAgency, Richard Osborne will be helping us sort of understand the client base that AstroAgency is working with. And I've got Anna Dawson from Terrabotics. Anna is actually in Kenya today. That's why the reference to Kenya was there, although the business is a Scottish-based business. And I have Robin Sampson, who's the Managing Director of Trade in Space. And you're going to hear about how Earth observation data is, through their business model and their incredibly adventurous activity, is changing the way certain trading markets are impacted by using Earth observation. But so that's my brief introduction, and I am going to bring them all into the picture now. I don't see the pictures. Here we are. There they are. So I'm going to start with Richard. Richard, can you first of all explain AstroAgency and what do you do?
Hi, Angela. That's a fairly straightforward question to start with. Thank you for that. Essentially, AstroAgency was set up to help companies in the space industry, or companies that wanted to get into the space industry, to see the opportunities that were available for them, because we realized that one of the problems with not just the space industry, but technical companies as a whole, is they have wonderful products and services often, but they're not very good at getting the message out to the wider world about what they're doing. And we'd been talking about this and decided that we needed to do something about it. And specifically, Daniel Smith, who's the CEO of the company and the founder, along with the chief operating officer, Daria Filishkina, they decided, right, okay, we're going to set up a space marketing company. But in doing so, they already had the space backgrounds. They both worked for a launch company, and Daniel had set up a couple of other space companies as well, such as a space brokerage company. And they wanted to bring in more technical firepower, which was how I got roped into it, because they realized that if you're dealing with a sector such as space, you really, really need to know the subject very well. And because I had a background in space going back since the time of the dinosaurs, they felt that it was worth bringing me in as well. And subsequently, we've then set up a technical team. Can
I interject there? I just want to, so I want to, because can I ask you, because there's lots of things that are coming through, and I could give you a monologue for 10 minutes, and I'm sure you could fill that amply, knowing you very well, Richard. But how many companies, just for everybody, how many companies, space companies that are in Scotland? And importantly for this, because remember, it's energy and finance meets space. How many companies are there in Scotland that are directly working with observation data? How many companies in Scotland in space, and how many and what kind of businesses are doing their business models are based on Earth observation?
There's round about 130 companies working in the space sector in Scotland. I say roundabout because pinning down the actual figure is invariably very hard. It does vary. What we did was we looked at the Earth observation market for Scottish Enterprise and SDI. And interestingly, we came up with 29 of those companies are actually active in Earth observation, directly active in Earth observation in Scotland. That's quite a sizable number, and that's quite exciting. It shows how much potential there is for Scotland.
And what kind of technologies are they using? Earth observation. What kind of technologies and generally what kind of markets are they targeting then?
Now that's again, it's very wide ranging. It's very interesting because you've got companies that are using optical technology, infrared, synthetic aperture radar, even, and that's just directly in Earth observation. Then of course there's geospatial technologies and the Internet of Things, but we were focused very much on the Earth observation side. Mm-hmm. In terms of applications, it's incredible. It's really, really quite wide. You've got everything from energy, agriculture, environmental, forestry. I'm trying. I'll forget some because there were there's so many that we've covered. Humanitarian,
yes,
and a lot of these they feed in to the whole ESG side of things, and in turn, that is where the financial markets come in, because you've got the whole issue around carbon sequestration and carbon accounting. And that is done through, or that can be done through using Earth observation data. Mm-hmm. And that's where Scottish companies are very, very good, world leading even.
Excellent. So you've got, this aspiration, or understanding, and I think even the Scottish Government, you know, lots of discussions on all of this, certainly all of our Economic Development Agency, yourselves, and our vibrant sort of industrial space base, understanding that space can be used to boost energy, finance, forestry, other sectors, to almost give them additional data, an additional dimension to their business, which is going to give them new opportunities for growth. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And one comment that we've heard a couple of times now is people have suggested that companies outside of the space industry really need a space strategy.
Indeed.
And that's not just financial companies, but that's wider. That's areas such as health authorities, even that's local government, because the value of using Earth observation data becomes so useful. You imagine, for instance, flooding, and the insurance industry can make use of the data you get from Earth observation satellites to better monitor where you're going to have problems with flooding, or even for loss adjustment afterwards. Mm-hmm. There's huge opportunities, and they're just there for the taking. And excellent. That's what's so exciting about the Scottish companies involved in this already. They can see the opportunities, and they're really going for it. It's very exciting.
So exciting. I'm going to switch now, if you don't mind. We'll bring you back in, and we'll have hopefully we'll get some more visionary sort of things, and we can have a good debate and not go down too many, not go into stratosphere too much, but I think something interesting, because the preamble to this was hugely stimulating. Maybe that's why people have come along as well. Anna Dawson from Terrabotics. Anna, you're if it's energy meets space, you're someone who actually, your career has transitioned from being, in the oil and gas sector, in sort of the traditional energy sector, and transitioning into the business that you're in. Tell us a little bit about that. And, yes, your own perspective, but, how are you using those skills, that perspective, in order to develop the business model of Terrabotics?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Angela. Well, I suppose both you and Richard have just kind of touched on that briefly, and just thinking about, the power of Earth observation data and how it's going to play such a pivotal role. I think especially in the energy sector transition. So being able to provide accurate real-time information on resource extraction, emissions, and environmental impacts. All of this satellite data can help to identify areas for improvement, helping to even manage assets, for example, for oil and gas extractions, new earth, raw metals industry. All of this new energy has to come from somewhere. And at the same time, we need to be able to enable kind of innovation and technology to be able to prevent any kind of negative effects on the environment and society as much as possible. And I think that's where I see Earth observation really coming in. And for me, coming from the oil and gas sector, and being an Earth scientist traditionally, and then working in strategy at Statoil, now Equinor, and also as an oil and gas analyst, you can often feel quite frustrated because you're making fairly big strategic decisions on behalf of the company based on effectively third-party scraped data. So take like the IHSs of Wood Mackenzie, all of this data, McKinsey. We use this data to effectively make key decisions for huge companies. But yet, when you think about the sort of width and breadth of energy and how it scopes, across the world and in areas that are often in remote locations, you don't get that true understanding. And that's where Earth observation can really play such a key role, because it's global. It's a global data set. It provides that optical, visual, contextual analysis that you don't get from a data point on an Excel spreadsheet necessarily.
Can you give us an example of that? Can you give us some specific examples of what kind of Earth observation data are you finding particularly enhancing to the models that you have? And there'll be lots of sectors in the energy.
Sure.
Yeah,
I can give you quite a good example of a neat example of a project that we worked on that I think would potentially help. So we work with the group Satellite Catapult and the Church of England Pension Board Fund, where there was of mining waste sites around the world. And these were seen as potential, could potentially present hazards and could cause like sort of industry disasters. And this data set was sort of, G disclosure. So it'd been created because there was like a response and a call from their shareholders. So this was a push from the Church of England to try and stimulate effectively and take responsibility of assets around the world. So mining tailing dams, they hold a lot of waste effluent from the mine itself. Now, that list was pulled together and, great job done. But then that's when sort of Terrabotics stepped in, and what we could say is, right, okay, deploying satellite data, Earth observation, and then our AI, which is like the really kind of the unique ingredients that we have. We were able to then effectively scan the globe and cross-check all of those mining sites and say, yeah, are they actually where they say they are? What does the mine look like? What condition is it in? And understanding exactly where the locations were. Often some of those dams were placed in totally different places. And you think, well, okay, well, that becomes like an incredibly dangerous asset if like that waste, dam was to breach, for example. So that's the sort of like ESG disclosure case study that we might work on. But also that can be, asset per asset. And just recently, actually, with Scottish Enterprise, we've been working to monitor emissions across oil and gas assets off the North Sea. So taking an array of different sensors, so looking at flaring data as well as emissions, methane, and that's just really the beginning. So that was our pilot study, and now we're kind of looking to kind of launch that on a global sense. And it's just very, very exciting when you start to think of bringing in all the types of different data sets. So not satellite data, we see that that's just part of the puzzle. But when we start to pull in ground sensor data, air data, so drones, IoT, really then you're creating a mesh of something that's really kind of powerful to sort of monitor continuously environmental and sustainable sort of behavior really for the big oil and gas and energy extraction companies. So yeah.
So there's a bit of sort of the auditing, policing, eyes in the sky, sort of able to guide kind of thing. But there's also, I'd imagine, so this is about where to make investments, how to make investments, and of course satisfying the shareholders and making sure that if someone's saying we'll give you capital, but only if you meet these requirements, and you can now help companies do that. Would that be fair to say? That's where this is?
That's right, Angela, exactly that. If you think about like carbon offsetting, for example, you've invested in a green bond. Have those trees been planted where they say that they've been planted? And did they ever get grown? those are the sorts of examples by which I think it actually sort of starts to like really bring transparency. You know, that's what I love about Earth observation. It's objective. So no longer can, you know, companies necessarily greenwash. And then the good players, you know, the operators that are, you know, really pushing to meet their sustainability goals and meet net zero, then they can prove that they're doing a good job. And I you know, I really think that this is the way to go in terms of, you know, not just having a tick box exercise where everything's sort of hidden behind, but actually Earth observation like brings things into the light, which I think is exceptionally powerful.
Yeah. And with that, so there's technology today, but so what do you think are going to be the technological advances? What are you expecting that's going to enhance the, you know, remote sensing industry in the coming years, that's going to move the dial even further on this?
Yeah, so I would say like specifically with remote sensing, we, you know, in the short term, I would say, you know, we've been waiting quite patiently, really, for these satellite constellations to be able to bring enough high resolution data at the volume that we look for. And it's really only just starting to happen that these constellations are starting to deliver. So I think that, you know, although these techniques for remote sensing have been around for, say, 30 years, you know, people know how to work with radar data, how to work with, say, optical data, but there's this new movement, a new era of exotic sensors really coming into play. So, for example, we've just seen a batch of radar satellites that have been launched, and now we're seeing the launch of hyperspectral and methane satellites, which is just really kind of exciting. So what we've been waiting for is the hardware, the satellites, you know, companies to go through those motions. And really it's the constellation. So, you know, being able to be provided with the volume of the data and that regular feed of data to give us what we need to be able to provide that kind of real-time data to the customers. That's what the end users are kind of looking for, is repeatable data. That monitoring service can really feed an application, you know, to solve problems, and also just to be able to monitor assets from kind of safety regulation, sustainability aspect. So I'd say that that was kind of like more the near-term future, and then going forward into the far future, I see like Earth's observation, I sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, just as a sort of one giant internet of devices. So, you know, we'll have these ground observation tools, so where sensors are picking up things on the ground. We'll have drones, and then satellites also talking to one another. So only last week, I think, there was a company that had only launched internet between satellites. So I believe that there'll just be this interconnected mesh of infrastructure where you're imagining a scenario where this environmental or sustainable sensing is going on all the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly sort of popping into my head. I'd said the words before of nowhere to hide, but you know, there's some things where we want transparency, and there's some things where we would like privacy, you know, of that transparency, and that's maybe a whole other topic. We'll kind of maybe come on to that one, or we could even have a whole question on that, because I'm sure people, sustainability, there's a double-edged sword here, right? So, and I think that's part of it. Is there anything you want to tell us about in sort of immediate development for Terrabotics, something that you think would be that listeners, you know,
I think what's kind of cool that we're doing, and we're so, you know, we're really excited about what's happening and has happened with this small feasibility study that we ran with Scottish Enterprise. Then that was looking at monitoring emissions and flaring off the North Sea. You know, that's kind of a project that we are really sort of putting all force behind. And so we've are now working with a consortium to actually do exactly what I've just discussed. So combine those ground sensors with air sensors, and bringing together like the data analytics, the machine learning, to be able to provide effectively a service for monitoring emissions for oil and gas and mining companies. So that's down the road, and that's what's going to be happening definitely with Terrabotics, fully focused on that for the next 6 to 12 months. So just watch this space and see what happens there. Yeah,
very, very exciting. So, and I think this will be we could maybe again with the whole group, but I think maybe for people who may be not familiar with how these new business models are working, the relationships. So how are you getting that data? Is it very proprietary relationships with people who are capturing the data? Because if everyone can have the same business model, how are you actually making a investable business model or
So this is a program that we receive funding through ESA, European Space Agency, with. So we because we've worked with oil and gas companies on in the past, we had previous funding for a product that we were building called Flare, Shale Analysts. So we were tracking unconventional drilling in the US using AI and machine learning. And then on top of that, we're then integrating the emissions data. So that's a product that we have been launching. We have customers. So we have also a project kind of based business as well. So we have regular customers such as Shell, BP, Equinor, big mining companies like Anglo America, for example. We've worked with many of the majors, and so we bootstrap our company. It's not we fund ourselves.
Yes, so, no, I know, but there's nothing like customers' money to pay for it. And I think
exactly.
Look, I remember going to Earth observation, the power of satellites thing in Berlin about 10 years ago, and people were grappling about what would the business models be. And I think that's really even investors are trying. Where is the business model? Where will these business get sticky and grow and scale?
Yeah. And
I think that's really what we're on to. Let me leave that. We can maybe have that general conversation sort of next, because I'm sure you've got customers, good, paying customers. You invoice them, you've got it, and it's a great model. Let me just move on to bring Robin in, and we'll come back if you get a chance to sort of maybe say some more. So Robin, I'm going to switch to you, Robin Sampson, who's the managing director of Trade in Space. So how can satellite data be utilized to protect and add value to financial assets and to sort of global supply chains? I mean, I saw a presentation at Glasgow Science Centre a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, and was blown away by what you're up to. And I would say I know we've got someone in Kenya today, but almost the sort of real just going out there and working with growers and getting into a market that is not an easy one to break into. So over to you. Tell us about that, Robin.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, I mean, just before I dive into the detail there, I have to make this point while it's still salient in mind. I think it ties together a lot of the things we've already discussed around verification, around proving ownership of assets. For me, the thing that is a real key enabler for finance and energy, as we heard from Anna, is looking at different ways to use data and software effectively. And that includes the data that we see from Earth observation sources. I mean, there's new ways to treat data from satellites now. We can literally create contracts from satellite images by using distributed ledgers and blockchain. So I just think that is a real key enabler for the whole kind of finance sector. Trade in Space has baked this into our company from the beginning. We've been using satellite images to procure and buy farmed goods and farmed produce and create direct trades between farm producers and their customers that might be in other sides of the world. And I think the best way to kind of try and explain how that works is if I point out, let me just unblur my background for a second. Behind me, you can see this is actually a sack of coffee, or it was, it's now empty. But this was the first time ever that an agricultural commodity had been procured from a satellite image and then traced and tracked across continents, where it was eventually all that coffee, it came from Colombia and it ended up in Scotland where it was roasted. And that was the first ever commodity trade exacted by a satellite system. It was made possible using a satellite image from Airbus, from the Pleiades constellation, and a lot of modern distributed ledger coding that let us use that image, link it to someone's bank account, send them finance to pay for the commodity, and then track and trace that all the way. So I think that, for me, is quite a powerful demonstration of what we can do with satellite images and satellite data going forward, and how we can use this in new financial services products. Eventually that link right all the way to the consumer as well, and let them interface with those supply chains.
Yeah, I mean, you said it very quickly and sort of almost as you were taking breath, but blockchain, a use of blockchain here, can you kind of touch on that? Where does the blockchain fit into your technology stack?
So this is where we basically use the blockchain to create a verifiable and valid contract for the goods. It's the way that we encapsulate the level 2 and the level 3 data that we extract out of the satellite image. We turn that into a transactable contract using a distributed ledger. So we basically make in this example, we make the satellite, in this case it was Pleiades, as I said. That's like a super node within our distributed ledger system. We have another node, which is the farmer, the producer. They have a blockchain wallet, and they're also connected on the chain to the producer, who in this case was a company called, the roasting company, small coffee roasting business in Scotland. They were also on the blockchain, and we administered that. So we create a network between all these individuals using a distributed ledger system, and we let them transact data along that chain. Have to make the point that the next thing that we'll be working on is incorporating something called self-sovereign identities into our blockchain systems, which is a kind of advanced feature. It basically means we can keep those farmer details private, and it means we can obfuscate a lot of the sensitive data and information from those people so that they can still sell their produce using this methodology, but not give away all the secrets and other things that they wouldn't necessarily want to share with everyone.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you've explained the potential of satellite observations to enable this peer-to-peer contracts and transactions. I mean, it just sounds, including, you're saying NFT-based supply is a terminology. Maybe people don't understand that. Contracts and printed in orbit. And then the other part that you want to talk about is RegTech and FinTech. What are those platforms? Maybe touch on all of that, the ESG data requirements, the implications from global carbon markets in relation to the use of satellite data. That's a whole bunch of stuff. That's a whole universe of things. Unpick it for us. Come on.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. There's too many buzzwords and too much in there, perhaps. But I think that what I'm trying to get at here is that I think that we're going to look at how we use satellite data in agriculture and finance applications very differently in the next 2 or 3 years. All these things will come together and create a whole new way that we can transact data. At the moment, there's been a race for the last 10 years to create actionable insight. That's been the kind of, that's what everyone wants, is actionable insight.
At the speed of relevance, perhaps?
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I wonder who coined that.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, indeed. But I think actionable insight. I think this will be old news. I think what people are going to want are transactionable insights, insights that they can actually contractualize and use and transact between each other. For me, that's the really exciting thing here. And maybe I've not really put the right words on the table to explain that, but I think that's where this is all going, are new ways to share data between agencies.
This is basically a new way of trading, isn't it? And really putting center stage the satellite services, the observation power of satellites is brilliant. Could you, give us more information on how your organization supports soft commodity trading business? I think that's really, to gain access to trade finance and include amount of transactional support to date. Let us understand that, because I think that's going to be fascinating to people. You've gone through the pain, you've worked this out. Maybe you can give us a wee bit of the journey, the dead ends you went, the things you had. I think that might be useful as well for people.
Yeah. Well, for us, the first principle was, how do we turn a satellite image into a contract between two different parties? And we did that. I explained that with the coffee. But then once you see that you can use that technique for other things, a contract can also be a certification. So the satellite image can also become a certification of, for example, a sustainability standard, or it can be a certification of carbon emissions or other things. There's other ways that you can use that contract. It doesn't just have to be a supply contract. So once we had that breakthrough and started looking at ways that we could use this technique to prove and help people to create corporate sustainability policies, then we started to scale quite rapidly. And then we now have around 250,000 coffee farms that we are collecting data from and proving that they are sustainable and meet regulatory compliance requirements to sell that coffee in the European market, which has a high standard of environmental requirements. So by kind of slightly shifting what we were doing, we were able to reach a whole new broad range of countries. I think we're collecting data from coffee producers in 15 countries now. We have 250,000 there. We're on the verge of signing up 50,000 cacao farmers, chocolate producers in South America. So we see that we're starting to really build momentum with this approach now.
Do you sleep at night? Do you get much sleep?
Not really.
Around the clock.
Not sleep.
No, around the clock. I mean, I'm really keen. I'm sure people have got questions here, and they've got lots of things to say. You have said, here's another question just before. Artificial intelligence into satellite systems, the impacts of that, resource allocation on the ground, potential enhancement of trading, logistics and distribution strategies, such as coffee commodity market and cacao. I mean, where does it stop, right?
Well, yeah, where does
artificial intelligence in satellite systems? How will that impact the resource allocation on the ground?
I think Anna mentioned a little bit about the work that had been ongoing that Terrabotics have been doing around AI. We also have developed our own AI. You won't be surprised to know that it's all targeted at coffee. So we have many different coffee detection algorithms that we've created and developed. So we can identify coffee in satellite images, any kind of satellite image. We can tell you if it is showing coffee and how much coffee it's showing. But for me, it's a short step then to be able to say, well, I can automatically tell you how much coffee is in this field. So maybe I can give you a good estimate of what the price for coffee is going to be in 6 months' time. Maybe I can tell you where you should be looking, where there is high risk in the coffee supply chain and you have a climatic vulnerability,
Right.
etc.
I was thinking that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so because we're in a very volatile world, and you know, temperatures and weathers, they're all crazy. We're appreciating that in Scotland. We're having a very late spring, so to speak. And, you know, but that's, you know, this is exacerbated around the world, and floods and droughts and fires and all this stuff. It's really going to be, we're going to be needing that, as you said, sort of transactional and investment, and knowing what predicting markets for trading purposes and spot trading or whatever else goes on in all of these different sort of markets. Anna, you were going to come in and say something, right?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, that's exactly this the sort of product that we were building with shale analysts across the US. So until last year, really under Trump legislation, the Permian Basin, which is based in Texas, was the largest producing oil and gas field in the world, outperforming anything in the Middle East at the time. And what we had trained our algorithms to do is to track the life cycle above ground from space of the fracking life cycle. So we'd start to see the roads appear, then we'd see the well pad being built, and then the fracking crew using radar data, and we could predict to the day production on that.
Wow.
So all sorts of companies would buy our data, you know. So the companies themselves, they want to understand actually what's going on, and also from a competitor standpoint, they in terms of preventing kind of legal cases happening, like for the likes of a pipeline being built over someone's right of way or onto their lease land, for example. And commodity traders, hedge funds, and a lot of private equity actually bought our data sets. So they're interested to know sort of what is being produced where. And then they can start to predict kind of what's coming out of the US. I mean, it wasn't, we hadn't scaled up to a global scale, but that was where kind of then the impetus for, you know, the ESG sort of market just boomed and blew up, and then the implications of emissions, and under Biden legislation, where it became law to actually report on your not just your calculated emissions, but your measured emissions at source. So that was then that this is like the new, you know, the new add-on product that we're bringing to market in those sectors. But yeah, like Robin says, it's like phenomenal, isn't it? You know, what you can train an algorithm to do, and then pull the space data, and then you've got a global, effectively like a global asset monitor on something that is of interest. Yeah.
How often are your data sets being updated? I mean, are you able to do this on
every 2 days?
All right.
So it depends on the sensor. So like for our missions data, we often get data sort of feeds every 8 times a day, depending on the gas that we're looking at. But then with, you know, the optical feeds, that's every sort of 2 to 3 days, and that's freely available as Sentinel-1, 2 that we get from ESA. So it just means that the algorithms are also improving, constantly improving, because, you know, you're getting this regular feed of data, and it fast apart the benefit and the reason why, you know, we see the value in this is, as I was mentioning before, you know, a lot of these companies buy third-party data sets, you know, and they pay a huge amount for one subscription data set that can provide data that's often out of date, you know, 3 months or 4 months out of date, because you scrape it from a law court or from a government database.
It's dead data, basically. It's yesterday's.
If you're an oil and gas company,
yeah,
it's yesterday's news, exactly. And so that's like the power really behind what we're doing. So yeah, it's pretty phenomenal.
It is really. Any questions? I'm going to ask Torsten, because time's galloping on, and I'm sure I'm finding this fascinating. I've got loads of questions bristling in my head. Torsten, anybody sort of with burning questions on the chat that they would like? I see there's at least 7 chat messages, and I just don't have time, or Q&A.
Yeah, good. No, our audience is very quiet today. It's
really?
But I mean, there are tons of questions I could pull in
go.
here. First, from our audience, there's one from Ramesh, who's joining us from India. He's really an avid follower of us. He asked about our solar energy from space. That is something you didn't touch on, and I'm not sure if you want to go on that. So Ramesh, we do have a Space Café Summit, especially on that, recorded. You find it in our archive, and at least 2 podcasts on that. So I wouldn't go into that today because that's an entire separate thing. The other one is potentially one for Richard. It came from Andrew Fournette from SGI. EU isn't only about the environment, but
from CGI.
CGI. So sorry for that. Isn't only about the environment, but also social with the data fusion. And as he has to drop off, he pointed to you, and you know how to answer it.
Oh yeah, that's very nice of him. Essentially, that's I know what that is. That's because Andrew previously worked for a company called AstroSat, who are based just outside Edinburgh, and they've used satellite data to monitor social exclusion during the lockdown. It's incredibly clever the way that they were using the data, but it demonstrated the value of using Earth observation data outside of the areas that people traditionally expect to be able to use it. And what he was suggesting is that it could be extended to people who may have dementia or neurodegenerative conditions, and to help ensure that they don't get lost or disappear, and all done via satellite.
So the social exclusion, what was being monitored and measured that was then giving, I imagine, the Scottish Government, for example, who would be looking for that economic growth, what was being monitored and measured from satellite observation that was helping us understand the social exclusion? Can you?
I have absolutely no idea.
I know he has the answer to that. We'll just have to ask him later. I'm racking my brain, but I'm not thinking fast enough to be able to do that. There was some parameter I remember. It was really interesting. For another time, folks. Sorry about that. Okie dokie. Look, any other questions? Anything else coming in?
No, many of the folks just are also on LinkedIn just replying that they enjoy the conversation today and have no further questions. So that what is nice.
Oh,
at least
right.
we're on the spot.
But I've got a question for Anna, actually. Based on what she was saying about being able to detect the growth of fracking development, surely there's an opportunity for you there with the likes of Scottish Enterprise, because you could use that same technique probably for monitoring the growth of wind farms, especially onshore wind farms, to ensure that everything's set up in the right place, and to minimize the scarring of land and so on.
Yeah, so actually, Richard, we have had a couple of clients come through, US clients, that's been sort of follow-on work from, they already subscribed to our Shale Analyst product, and they wanted to get sort of ahead of investments into solar panel areas across the US, and also wind farm locations. So we've been helping them to sort of survey a whole bunch of areas, and provide sort of advice in terms of, what the right sites would be for them to choose, based on the areas that they had in mind, and where they pulled those areas from a database that they were looking at investing from, for both capturing sun and looking at wind. So yeah, it's definitely something that's very much on the, on the cards. And yeah, we can talk about that further, actually, Richard, if you've got particular projects in mind. But yeah, so I think it's just a small company. You can't do everything all at once. But yeah, no, it's great. Yeah.
I would have a follow-on question to both of you, to Anna and Robin.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm totally fascinating what you guys are doing and how you apply the satellite data to a real world problem. What sometimes we ignore that there are real world problems if we do space, because space is so cool. However, what's next? What's up on your agenda for later this year in terms of development, or in terms of next steps?
Robin, I'll let you go first on that, because I think I sort of answered that partially, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Anna. Well, for us, the next step is to start working in other commodity supply chains. That's our objective. I mentioned coffee and cacao. We think we can add a lot of value to other commodity verticals. We've done work with wheat and grain supplies in East Africa and in Australia. Also with palm oil producers, there's a huge demand for sustainable palm oil. So we think we can help to certify lots of palm oil that is imported as sustainable. And we're looking for ways to find partners to help us with that. I think on the business side as well, we're expecting to internationalize within this year as well. We expect to have staff in locations in Colombia and also potentially somewhere in Europe as well. So there's exciting things happening within the business as a business, but also on the technology side as well.
Mm-hmm. There's a question which I don't know, it's sort of, there's Adrian Guzman has asked, I don't know if that's, I don't know if I bypassed it. It was for Robin as well. He says, might be technical, but there's multi-sig contracts in DAO governance, and saying, I mean, this is a whole new and novel model in space. So that doesn't, I don't know what DAO governance is, but maybe just that that's obviously an important question to them. Can you say something to that, Robin?
Yeah, I can. Certainly on the multi-sig aspect, yes, the contracts that we've created are multi-sig contracts that require to be verified by other people in the chain. We haven't created a DAO or a DAO. That is not something that's happened yet. Would be really exciting to have kind of DAO-based satellite systems, and I'm sure that will happen. I think a company called Space Chain has actually looked into concepts around incorporating DAOs in space infrastructure projects. But yeah, certainly multi-sig contracts are a thing that's already happening. Yeah.
Okay, and I saw there was one there that just disappeared. Actually, let me see.
No. Robin just answered the question of Chris asking about.
Christopher Bosquillon.
Yeah.
Was asking about agri-food and supply chain space.
About the extending of the business to other commodities.
Yeah. But he was saying about transportation and logistics monitoring, which is a different perspective on this. So that's really important as well. I mean, lots of stuff on logistics. Anything to add into that, Robin? Because I think everything comes through the Suez Canal and comes out, what about the logistics and all of that? And people, I don't know you, but we're beginning to feel less and less comfortable taking something in a little plastic sort of container. We're very grateful that it's been produced somewhere, but the whole logistics and the cost of that logistics to the planet as well. I mean, is this something that can be looked at too?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and we can begin once we have that traceability system. It starts in the field. It starts at the commodity stage. All food products ultimately are you know, derived from those base commodities. But once we have those tracked, then we can increase that data set and we can ultimately come up with models for the whole product that will include things like the food miles and other things that we can encode into that contract that should accompany that product throughout its life cycle. So it does become a big data problem really quickly, but there are solutions. We've looked at how we can incorporate Scope 3 carbon emission data into things like coffee commodity products, so that the finished roasted product that you buy in the supermarket, we can track details around that as well. So I think all of that is happening. It's just that, you know, it's perhaps not moving so fast at the moment. I don't know. We're getting there, and there are lots of other. It becomes an integration problem, you know. The data is there, but how to integrate it all together, I think, is the bottleneck here.
Yeah, yeah. But I suppose it's always like the thing, once you've seen it, the vision's there, then, you know, we're smart and just adapt and do so. Anybody got anything? Because we're getting to 3 minutes too, and I'm just...
We have a final question from Kevin here. Could the panel elaborate on what the key drivers for demand are for space data? Is it cost saving? Is it ESG reporting requirements, legislations, or all of these?
That's a brilliant question.
I could speak for our industry. So in terms of mining, looking at kind of rare earth metals and projects, I'd say that the biggest driver right now is probably meeting ESG, so environmental sustainable governance, and that being from a reporting side. However, I'd say 2-3 years ago, you know, a lot of, and then I'd say the dual, like, second probably priority is saving costs. So if you, instead of having to put boots in the ground, you know, send people out to run a safety report, instead you can have satellite data analytics. One of the products that we also produce are very accurate DEM, so digital elevation models. And typically we'll find that, you know, there's a huge cost saving there. And also some of the projects that we've done, you know, independently for big oil and gas companies have said that we've saved them, you know, millions. So for example, helping them to kind of map access areas if they were going to build a refinery in a certain place. There was a project that we did in the Middle East tracking sand dunes through time. And that was to help a particular oil company plan for its operations in terms of where they were going to put their refinery based on the rate of speed of these sand dunes moving quite fast through the desert. Now, to have, you know, geologists go out and sort of take kind of personal measurements, you know, that's a huge amount of money to send a massive team out there. And if you can monitor these things from space and provide the findings, then you can actually save a company in terms of their decision making, making financial decisions for those sorts of companies. I mean, the money saving is vast.
Fantastic.
So there's several applications, you know, that we work specifically depending on the client's needs. But yeah, I hope that helps answer the question.
Indeed. Anybody else got anything, Sana? That's really great examples. I mean, sand dunes, the mobility of sand dunes, who'd have thought, right? But yeah.
Yeah, crazy, right?
I'd make the point quickly that it's worth bearing in mind how much Scotland has grasped the opportunity here, because we're seeing this more than other areas. The Scottish, on the commercial side and on the government side, it's very interesting that there's a lot. They're awake to the prospects that Earth observation brings, and it's very exciting. It's to see that level of interest and enthusiasm. And you've seen it today with both Anna and Robin, that the enthusiasm is infectious.
Yeah, there's almost a sort of new industrial era, isn't it? That's really what we're in. And I noticed Kevin is just Kevin Scullion, who raised the question before, is saying as well, you know, it's interesting to see ESG reporting requirements is a major driver in all of this. That seems like almost a pivotal point within the energy sector. Really, really interesting.
Absolutely.
Well, what benefits the sector is you have people like Sharon Pride at Scottish Enterprise and Kevin Scullion, because people like that are driving it. They're so passionate, so enthusiastic. Yeah. It really helps. It makes it much more attractive a proposition.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen that, you know, just from the Terrabotics side. We have to say a huge thank you, you know, really for the push that we can see, you know, the drive behind the Scottish movement really to invest in space. It's been brilliant for us.
Yeah.
And we've just been experiencing that more recently, having opened an office. But I think, yeah, very cool. It's very nice to see.
Fantastic. Well, look, I don't know if anybody's got any last nuggets that they desperately want to say, because you've been very, again, hats off to Sharon Pride and Kevin actually, who, but Sharon did all the legwork of finding you guys, because I think you were out in that tour of Switzerland where there's a Scotland Swiss, just for a word for Innovo and all of the people that were in Zurich who were at the fintech community of Scotland, who've also embraced space. And there've been some very interesting encounters and thinking and brainstorming and businesses that have helped businesses connect and find and help their business models. And some of these, what I would call them heroes of our economic development agencies, are really, really helping us. Words also to our Space Scotland group with Hina Khan, and we've mentioned Daniel Smith of AstroAgency, but also Christina Tamina, who puts a lot of time in, and Andrew, who's since moved to CGI. Numerous people, very vibrant community in Scotland. If you want to come and join us, set up a base in Scotland, be part of that community. It's the pulse of where great innovative and creative thinking is going on. And to Torsten, who's been supporting us through all of this for the last couple of years and helping us report and setting up Space Café Scotland, and giving us this platform to be able to share our experience, because, you know, it's a big world and there's a lot of issues. And I think the quicker people cotton on and learn and from what we're doing, then I think we'll get to objectives that are going to make everybody feel better about living on the planet going forward, and make it much more sustainable. That's all I've got to say. I'm going to hand back to you now, Torsten, if you've got any words of wrapping up. And I know you've got lots of things you announced for Space Café. Become a space watcher is the catchphrase.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Thank you to this fantastic panel. It was an absolute insightful discussion today. We have a bit more program for you planned for the next weeks, as usual. Next week, we have our next Space Café Israel. By Medad Payente with Shimrit Manam. And Shimrit is head of the Homeland Security in Israel. So they're talking really about our homeland security and the use of satellite data. And yes, they will do that. They will use that. A week later, we have in Berlin the 14th IAA Space Symposium on small satellites on Earth observation and so on and so forth. And we used that occasion to have a Space Café live from the stage there, together with the legend Enrico Stoll and Jens Berdermann from the DLR. And a day later, we use the occurrence of the community here in Berlin to have our next Space Café Berlin in person by Andreas Schepers in the wonderful planetarium of Berlin. So then we are moving on to the Munich New Space Conference and end of May to the IAF GLOG conference in Oslo, where we do some reporting from. And then later this month of May, we have another Space Café Black Ops by our editor-in-chief, Dr. Emma Gatti, together with Namrata Goswami. And I think this time they talk about India and the space defense capacities of India, but I'm not sure. 1st of June, we have our next Space Café Law Breakfast already lined up for you with two wonderful next generation guests with Rubimbo Samgana and Dr. Antonino Salmeri. So, and that's on that end. Let's see that I can switch that off here. And yeah, please find and subscribe to our events on Eventbrite. That's where we're running it from. As always, we would like to hear your feedback. Please check in with us on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up for a daily or bi-weekly newsletter. And if you want to support even more events like that, get yourself with something special and become a space watcher today. That's what it is all about. To help us in our supporter program. Thank you all very much for this super interest today in the audience, and especially on the panel. Thank you, Angela, for hosting this inspiring talk, and this entire team that make that happen. Especially also on the Scotland side, we are very grateful for your support, Sharon, Kevin, Hina. I know I forgot now a few more, but our gratefulness is with you. Thank you very much for joining. Hope to see you next week, or in the meantime, visit our website or follow us on social media. And don't forget, and Angela said it already, become a space watcher. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
Thank you.